Hey, good morning. How's it going out there, folks? Welcome back here to a Monday, about 10:35 here, Monday morning, September 16th, 2024, Pacific time here in California. Latest activity on the earthquake 3D globe shows a 1.6 into the Southern California area. We had another three-pointer down here off of the on the Malibu coast fault here. A 3.7 to be exact, coming in about 4:22 in the morning. And folks are just getting up, maybe ready for work, shaking things up out there across the Malibu area. It was felt fairly broadly over in the region here, Simi Valley area, down even to the Huntington Beach area of Southern California. So things are continuing to shake, rattle, and roll out here across this area of the state. Now, this is a region that had a 4.7 earthquake here a while back. Let me show you guys a sequence of earthquake activity out here. Coming up on, by the way, about 57 earthquakes in total tally. And it all started off here with a 4.7 earthquake, maybe a 1.6 here a couple weeks prior. Could have been a foreshock, but this type of event here started off with a main quake of a 4.7, and we've seen a number of 2s and 3s in there. And, of course, the 3.7, one of the latest larger ones. Another 2.8 came in following that 3.7. Let's see what we got today so far. 1.5, 1.5, 3.7, 1.7, 2.8. So 5 earthquakes here so far today. Now, there was a slight break here yesterday, although we had a couple more smaller quakes in there as well. Fairly consistent in terms of the multitude of quakes on each day, but today a little bit on the larger size, 57 earthquakes again. Now, this is just not one area. You know, if we were to just ignore all the recent activity out here and say, okay, well, this is normal, you know, any earthquake of a 4.7 can see aftershock sequences similar to this, but this is not normal in the sense that this is just one of about 4 to 5 different areas around Southern California here that have noticed an elevated increase in earthquake activity. And that includes areas up here around the Bakersfield where that's quiet right now. But if we were to go back last 30 days, this is just a handful of some of the quakes. This area has seen a 5.2 back about 6 weeks ago. Puente Hills Thrust Fault over here had a 4.4 earthquake. You'd have to go back past 30 days as well to see that activity. And Ridgecrest area here had a number of swarms as well. And it's just an overall picture or an overall pattern out here of increasing earthquake activity. And it's all pretty much up against the San Andreas Fault here. I think some of these specific areas that we're seeing here really haven't seen a lot of earthquake activity in recent times. And that's the area, that's the common thing, I guess, that they all have. The factor they all have in common here. I'm trying to spit this out. It's Monday, so I can stumble a little bit, right? Excuses. So all these fault systems that really haven't seen any recent earthquake activity are under quite a bit of strain, and they're starting to show what's really going on out here, and that is the bigger picture, the San Andreas Fault here. I think all this activity is increasing and leading up to potentially a bigger quake here in this area. We've seen way more elevated activity out here than we have seen recently. And in fact, Dr. Lucy Jones there, I think everyone knows who Dr. Lucy Jones is by now. She's the face of the earthquake community. Even though she doesn't officially work now, she's retired, she still does news interviews and informational statements whenever earthquake activity is elevated. More recently, she stated here that we've seen more 4s this year, this year, than we have at any given year in the last 65 years. So that should tell us something right here. And for the folks that are stating that these earthquakes are releasing the strain, relieving the pressure out here, making us all feel a little bit better, is not the case, folks. That is not truthful. That's a false belief. If anything, we're increasing our chances out here of seeing something bigger. She was asked that on the news there. I think it was KTLA. I can't remember exactly which news station, but you can find it on YouTube. I posted it numerous times there on my Facebook Earthmaster account. Just go back there and watch a couple of the videos I posted, and you'll see she was specifically asked that question, whether we are, with these little earthquakes out here, preventing the big one from happening and maybe pushing it off, relieving strain. And the facial expression that she gave while shaking her head, and then the words that came out of her mouth, told us everything we need to know. She said, unfortunately, no. At the same time, half smirking, half frowning, shaking her head no. These little ones are not relieving any strain, folks. If anything, this is a factor into the major increasing strain out here. And that's the times that we need to watch here, the San Andreas Fault. And it's not just the San Andreas Fault. It's numerous faults out here that are well overdue, folks. So anything could pop here at any time in terms of a large damaging earthquake. The best thing to do is be prepared. Now, for the Malibu area, 7 earthquakes there in the last 24 hours. This area has seen, or have seen, a little bit of activity out here historically. I pulled up at least what the records have kept here from the USGS, specifically in a little area here right around the Malibu Coast Fault here. And it looks like 1827 here seen a 6.0, or had a 6.0, fairly damaging earthquake compared to what we've seen here recently, with the largest being that 4.7 on the 12th of this month. 4.6. You guys know we had a 4.6 back there in February of this year. This earthquake a little bit further along the plate, or the fault system over here. 5.0, a little bit off of that, back in 1989. But prior to that, a little skimpy out here in terms of earthquake activity, specifically on it. So we know events can get larger out here along the Malibu Coast Fault. So that's obviously a little concern and something to watch, as it appears, there's numerous fault systems out here that are waking up and showing signs of strain. The Malibu Coast Fault here, one, an area up here outside of Bakersfield, an unnamed fault system, not on any known fault, but on a potentially one of these fracture zones out here from the bigger earthquake quite a few years back, the 1952 earthquake. Appears like that earthquake activity up here is occurring on that zone, or just off of it. And then a couple other regions out here, Puente Hills Thrust Fault, really haven't seen a lot of earthquake activity out here. That's waking up as well, and that's capable of producing a 7.2 to 7.5. I was reading this article here that was put out from the... there's not a whole lot of information here on this Puente Hills Thrust Fault in terms of when the last major event happened here. It's a blind thrust fault, so there's a little bit of difficulty, but they did manage to document the occurrence of at least 4 magnitude 7.2 to 7.5 earthquakes on this fault, which is directly underneath Los Angeles downtown, during the past 11,000 years. Future events of this type pose a significant hazard to the metropolitan area of Los Angeles. And unfortunately, though, there's not a specific time frame of when the last one happened. But there have been, at least more than 4. There was some documented evidence of additional older uplift and sedimentary thickening in the underneath the area. The slip rate in some of these regions range from about 1.1 to 1.6 millimeters a year. And it's an interesting technical scientific article here. I had to log in through my college to be able to access it, or pay for it. But and like I say, we can't get an exact time frame of when it was. So I do have to study this a little bit more and maybe make my own assumption as to the data that they've described here in terms of the thickness of all the sediment that's been building up out here in between earthquakes. Again, that's an area underneath Los Angeles. There is a little bit of information, newer information I found that is describing that the fault system over here on the western edge is lengthening over here towards the Hollywood area, which would make it a little bit lengthier, I guess is the word I'm looking for. And in terms of producing a full rupture out here, that would be fairly damaging across this area directly underneath Los Angeles and about the Hollywood area. So that's been waking up recently in the past 6 to 7 weeks. And it's just all these other factors that we have to look into play here that is pointing towards something bigger happening out here in Southern California. And again, any of these fault systems could pop at any time, but I firmly believe it's along the plate boundary itself. With all the elevated activity here in Nevada recently, a lot more than I've seen in a linear fashion up here east of the Sierra Nevada mountains. And you can pretty much draw a line here across the Tehachapi Mountains area where the Bakersfield activity is, and then southward. A lot of strain up here against the Pacific plate, and then the interaction here with the North American plate along that plate boundary, San Andreas Fault. So these things are coming and going. There's not continuous days of elevated activity, but it appears as though we could see some further activity today. It normally starts off with a 3 or 4 somewhere, and then things start getting elevated over the next 24, 48 hours. So keep an eye on that. See a couple more earthquakes here in the last hour, 1.7 north of this area. That would make sense here. The strain from the stress fault adding further strain upstream here. One earthquake near Good Hope, fairly deep underneath this area. That is just off the Elsinore Fault. And just general typical microquake activity out there right now. So, just be on guard, folks. We got a lot going on. Had a fairly large event over here across the Mariana Islands as well this morning. 436. Now, that kind of coincides with that earthquake. 3.7. 422. So just a few minutes. I get it. There's thousands of miles away distance in between these two quakes here, but that's a lot for us, right? If you think about it, though, for plate tectonics, we're only rotating here on an eggshell, so to speak. That's fractured, floating on molten rock. A lot of convection takes place underneath this area to produce the plates in motion, and it almost appears before any big giant earthquake over here across California happens, we'll see some type of larger event take place in this region. But this was kind of vice versa. We've seen this 3.7 strike just a few minutes prior to that 6-pointer out here. I don't know. It just seems like there's always something that will temporarily relieve strain out here along California, like a bigger quake out here. In fact, we were looking at some type of a decent earthquake activity here across the Cascadia back in 2011. Is that when the Japan earthquake struck? I believe that 9-pointer. And that actually relieved strain out here across the West Coast and the Cascadia for a little while. A large amount of land shifted here to the west, creating a little bit of pressure relief out here across the eastern Pacific. And a lot of times these bigger earthquakes can relieve a lot of strain here for California, but I don't know if this 6-pointer is going to be enough. But it almost seems as if we're getting ready to see a big earthquake out here, and almost immediately following any type of potential large escalation of earthquake activity, things get relieved in California by some bigger earthquakes out here across the western Pacific, because the general plate motion here is off to the west-northwest here for the Pacific plate, and in a sense here, any large-scale adjustment could temporarily relieve the strain out here against the eastern Pacific. Again, thousands of miles, but when you move one portion of the plate here, it can ultimately affect other areas, not only nearby, but all across the plate here, with various other areas here in the plate boundary. I've seen it happen quite a bit. But we'll continue to watch California. Again, I don't think a 6-pointer here is enough to relieve strain out there in California right now. We're still seeing a couple earthquakes out there in the last hour. Bay Area, pretty quiet. Not a whole lot going on. Nothing here through Nevada. I mean, there's a couple smaller spikes. Unfortunately, I can't access the Nevada station. I'm going to have to maybe reset this and see if I can get a station out there again, because we have been having earthquake activity out here, and as of last week here, they just seemed like they stopped reporting the earthquake activity, even though it was showing up on the Nevada station when I can actually access it. But I had some computer issues here, and it went down, and I had to reset the network, and then I couldn't access the Nevada station once again. So I believe there's earthquake activity out there. I don't know why they would shut it off, but I'll see if I can't get that back up and running here through the day. Southern end of the Cascadia, all this activity from yesterday. Up north, up into the Queen Charlotte Sound area, still only seeing 2 earthquakes up there. Now the EMSC model here on the globe is showing maybe an additional aftershock of a 4.7 or 4.3 earthquake, showing there on the globe. 4.7, 4.3, and of course that 6.5 that stirred up there. But that's still a little wimpy in terms of the aftershock sequence that should occur up here. So this is something going to have to watch. Not quite certain that we're done with the elevated activity out here in this area for now. No major adjustment anywhere else along the plate boundary, so kind of odd. We'll continue to keep an eye on that for sure. Alaska area, a couple 4s out here across the Aleutian Trench. There's our big 6-pointer, 6.3 out in the Mariana Trench. That appears to have added further strain out here against that subduction zone up in Japan. So notice, let's look at these timestamps here. Okay, 6-pointer, 4:36 in the morning. This area of the plate, got to remember the Pacific plate is pushing up against the Filipino plate. West-northwest, the general arrow motion here. I'd have to pull up my my plate boundary map, but it takes me a minute, so I'm just going to describe this here. So all that motion and plate motion putting strain here on the Filipino plate, which is this segment right here. That's where that subduction zone extends underneath the Eurasia plate here. Now this area is moving off to the southeast here in this general pattern. 4:36 in the morning, 6.3. A couple hours later, further strain here in the expected region of 5.5 and 4.7 following this event. Obviously, you know, sometimes it can stir up 20 minutes later, 5 minutes later, or hours later. In this case, a couple hours later, we've seen increasing strain here from these earthquakes that struck this morning. And this area is the region that they put out a megaquake warning here. The Japanese government put out a megaquake warning here a number of weeks back due to elevated activity here in this region. And that includes a 7-pointer that stirred up out there. Southern end here of the major subduction zone. So we do got to watch that as well. There's definitely a lot of potential out here right now. And as I've been saying, we've been living in some quiet times here. Super quiet, right? Everyone's, you know, building up. Cities, infrastructure is at an all-time high. Massive population densities out here. We've just been very complacent, I think. A lot of people not. You know, they're very aware of what is capable of happening out here in Southern California, but a lot of people not so much. You know, they just go to work and never think about any of the potential hazards out here in Southern California, or anywhere around the world for that matter, when it comes to natural disasters and hazards. Hawaii has made it up to the orange level. Check this out. They've raised the alert level to an orange, and I expected that. I called that, was it last night or the night before, when they were having that magma migration and intense earthquake swarm. Well, they finally upgraded it here to an orange. Smart choice. The latest informational statement here, this was put out early this morning, Hawaii time. They haven't put out an update yet, but this is when they added the level from yellow to orange, and then from advisory to a watch for this volcano, Kilauea volcano. The intrusion of magma that began yesterday in the Kilauea's Middle East Rift Zone continues, increasing the potential for an eruption in this area. We discussed this last night in between two certain older areas of eruption there that happened back in the, we'll check out that map in a little bit, in the 70s right here. So the USGS raising the volcano alert. Currently, activity is taking place in a remote area of Kilauea's Middle East Rift Zone within Hawaii Volcanoes National Park. No changes have been detected for now in the Lower East Rift Zone or Southwest Rift Zone. So intense localized earthquakes between these regions right here, accompanied by ground deformation patterns, indicative of underground crack growth beginning at approximately 6 p.m. on the 14th, when I called it 2 days ago. While the intensity of the earthquake activity has decreased, continued ground deformation changes show that magma is still moving beneath the ground from summit storage chambers to the area between these regions right here. So there's a strong signal of typical of gas or steam venting in the Middle East Rift Zone, and a low frequency tremor, right? That's obviously a sign of magma fluid movement. There's no geothermal thermal anomalies yet in this area, but let's go take a look here and see what we got for the latest graphs here. Now, the summit area showed a huge drop around that 4.4 earthquake that we've seen, right? Was it 4.7, 4.4? I can't remember. We've had so many earthquakes here, it's hard to keep track of them. Look at the past month here. We lost about a month volume, maybe a little bit more than that. A month's worth of accumulated volume from the summit off to the Middle East Rift Zone. That's where that magma has gone to. That's why we're seeing that elevated earthquake activity specifically in this area now. But this area has seen, this is the third magma intrusion, and the previous two magma intrusions moved that magma off to right about here, Upper East Rift Zone, and we've seen that on the graphs there. Now it appears as though there's enough pressure to further escalate the magma migration down here in this pattern. Not enough to break through to the surface where we were watching that last couple magma intrusions and earthquake activity. But now with the further push of magma, that's gone underground further and to the east-southeast here, where we're seeing the ongoing activity right now. Now, whether there's enough magma and pressurization here in this area to break through to create an eruption, we'll have to see. It's right in between a number of former lava flows. This one back in 1972 to 1974. This one here more recent, 1997, 2007. And there's a couple other ones in here as well that just produced some weak lava flows, 1968, 1971. But a lot of times here we won't see repeated eruptions here in the area of former lava flows. It'll break through in a newer region. And it's possible, though, due to these weaker magma runs here in the past, that it could break through to this area, potentially. Or, if not, then it could sit at a little period of time here until another further push of magma into the area from the summit, and potentially could lead off here down towards the Lower East Rift Zone. Definitely interesting to watch here. Let me pull up the webcams here for this area. And by the way, we'll get to space weather activity here in a little bit. Looks like it's arriving much slower than anticipated. Looks that's from August 2020, right? Oh, no, I take that back here. That is today's date. But they have the older date up here. So newer date. It looks cloudy out there, a little foggy. Can't really see too much out there for a Monday out there on the Big Island. everything is cluttered with some clouds out there, some fog. So there's really not a visual at the surface levels, but I think we would know if there is an eruption ongoing. Let's check out the seismograph stations here around this area. And there's our magma intrusion event here with that 4.4 earthquake. Started it off. Huge amount of earthquakes there. We're talking about hundreds of earthquakes there in the couple hours following that big event. That's magma intrusion. And since then, over the last couple days there, it's still ongoing here. We haven't really seen any significant drop in the migration of the magma in the area. We're still seeing a lot of earthquake activity out here in the last 12 hours. This is the last 12 hours. Goodness. Quite a bit. Every single one of those spikes are indicative there of earthquake activity. Pressurization underneath the area and slow migration of that magma further and further towards this area. Off to the, this is pretty much due east here, right? Yeah, if you look at the legend here, that'd be pretty much due east off towards this region here, but it's hard to say if we're going to see any activity in this region. I guess if it's going to do it, it's going to break through in this area here. So we'll continue to watch that as Kilauea Volcano alert level has been raised from a yellow to an orange due to the magma intrusion that I called here a couple days ago. Should have been at an orange here when it happened, but better late than never. There's the earthquake activity occurring. No further, I mean, there's really nothing of notice down here across the lower East Rift Zone for now, but we'll keep an eye on that. All right, backing out of here, a couple more earthquakes in Southern California since I've been yakking here. One right smack dab on the San Andreas Fault, 1.4. Again, I think we're going to see a little bit of elevated activity here. It comes in these little patterns and starts off with a 3 somewhere out here, and then things just tend to kick up for the next couple days. So we'll watch this throughout the day for sure. There's that earthquake in New Zealand from yesterday, 4.6, just shy of the Hikurangi subduction zone here. That's another major subduction zone that's could potentially be overdue. There's not a whole lot of information on when the last one was, but from some readings there, I'd say over 300 years ago. So obviously we got a number of areas that are capable of producing some large events. But we've been living in some quiet, well-organized times, at least here along the states. And New Zealand's had their share of earthquakes, but recently awfully quiet. Only some deeper movement quakes here underneath the area, an occasional 4, but major adjustment is needed, unfortunately, across this area due to a lot of the strain. 3.2 South Island area. Yeah, there's that 6.3 Mariana Islands. We'll definitely keep an eye on this area here. Definitely wanting to put the strain up here against this area of the plate boundary, and of course that subduction zone is capable of producing an upper 8. Some deeper quakes here underneath the area right now as well. Let's see, USGS reporting that? Negative. So there's a smaller deep quake here. Is it this 3.4? Yes, it is. Look at that. Maxed out at 750 kilometers here on the globe. I don't think it goes any deeper than that. So that is a super deep earthquake there. Happened at 512. That occurring following this large event over here. So like I say, the larger events can definitely strain many areas out here, putting some deeper strain out here in the Indonesia Islands area, and of course surface adjustment going on here across that subduction zone following that 6.3 large movement there. All right, let me get my voice here. Change in the weather. It's actually quite cool this morning here. I think we dropped in the mid 50s. It's supposed to only be 73 degrees here today in California, Northern California. And that for us is nice because we've been in the hundreds all summer long, hundreds or higher. Five-pointer down here across the southeast Pacific Rise at or five. Yeah, that's five-pointer out there, southeast of Easter Island, which is up here. A little fracture zone. Looks like it's in a strike slip zone here. There's some divergent boundary zones as well, indicative of new seafloor, spreading seafloor center here. That potentially could add further strain out here, and we tend to do see upticks following any activity out here across the South America region. Things should be on the uptick here today. Right now, a couple smaller, newer quakes in there, but we'll keep an eye on it. There's just a lot going on out here, folks. Goodness. 5.2 earthquake across the Indonesia island, or the I'm way off here, Mediterranean area. Let's see where that's at. Fairly decent earthquake up there around Romania, striking a few hours ago. 83 miles deep here. There's a subduction zone, or yeah, it looks like a subduction zone area around this region. Off of the major plate boundary, but obviously there's some mountain ranges out here. Let's see what we got for historical data. That's actually a fairly decent sized earthquake. And looks like they do get a little bit of earthquake activity in the 5 range, maybe a little bit higher as well. I do see some, what looks to be some 6s out there. There's today's earthquake, that 5-pointer there in the star. Some smaller and some larger events out there historically since about 1900. So even though, you know, it's odd, we don't see a lot of activity out here in that magnitude, it appears as though it does happen. Atlantic Ocean, pretty quiet. Not a whole lot popping off there for now. Let me see what else we got going on here across the eastern portion of the country. 1.6 up in New Jersey, 2.2 from yesterday in South Carolina. There's a couple earthquakes down here. Nothing big going on, but some slight activity. All right, let's check out space weather. I'm wondering what happened to our CME. Where did it go? Where did it go, folks? Where's our G3 class storm? It's coming in much later than expected or forecasted, or it completely missed us. Now, they've adjusted this here a little bit. Last night when I was doing the update, they called for the brunt of the material, the plasma cloud, to hit us right about this time period, between 09 and 12, early this morning. Since then, they've adjusted the forecast accordingly a little bit later. G3 class storm now forecasted between 21 and 0 UTC time. The current UTC time here is 18:08. So we're roughly in about this time period right here. And well, in about 3 to 4 hours or so, we should start seeing some indications of that CME hitting us. If not, then I have a feeling it completely dodged us. All the forecast models were calling for a decent shot from that large full halo CME that was produced from that X flare a couple days ago, almost 2 days. Well, it's been 2 days ago now. So either this is an extremely slow moving CME or it has missed us entirely. Nothing showing up here on the auroras, just very minor on the KP index here. So we'll have to watch that. Timing probably not the best, but we'll have to see when this arrives in terms of if it even happens. Let me check out the real-time solar wind stream here and see what we have. No, we would notice this would go up dramatically here. This is a low amplitude reading right now because the solar wind has been consistent, but we should see this go up above 600 or higher. So the CME obviously hasn't even gone past us or missed us. A lot of times if we get like almost a near hit or near miss, then we'll see some type of indication of it on these graphs, but I'm not seeing it. Nothing in the density or plasma. That's not the best right here for auroras. That's suppression. Um, so, what just happened there? What did I do? There we go. But the BZ component here is above this line, and that's not a good sign there if you're going to see the auroras later tonight. So we'll have to see how that reacts to the impact from that CME, pending it even happens. It almost looks like it completely missed us, but they're still calling here for a forecast of a G3 class storm later tonight. Flaring activity, a little C flare activity. Unfortunately, the culprit of that X flare here a couple days ago, and the result of the full halo CME, appears to be stabilizing and weakening here. There's not quite as complex center core magnetically in this area, and I mean, I guess there's still a little bit here around this region, the far side region here of the sunspot, that's capable of producing some stronger flaring, but it appears as though it's weakening. So that will diminish our X flare threat out here. A couple active regions further out on the southeastern limb. Not all that impressed with them. I'm not seeing a whole bunch of complexity, so we'll just kind of keep an eye on things here, see if anything wants to develop or further escalate. But tonight, I guess we'll watch for that CME activity. Again, no sign of it. And it's either super slow, which doesn't make sense because it was shot off at a high speed, or it dodged us entirely. Severe weather threat, mainly limited up here across North Dakota area. 2% chance there of tornado activity. That includes portions of Wilmington, looks like. Wilmington. Got to pronounce that correctly there. That's over here across North Carolina. They got a 5% chance here. Green in the 2%. But we do have Bismarck, North Dakota in that 2% over here across this area. So a little bit of spinning water vapor potentially today with those thunderstorms. Wind and hail threats in there as well. Aside from that, general thunderstorm activity out here across the Great Basin eastward. Seismograph stations, pretty quiet. Real quick look here at California once again. One more earthquake coming in since I'm telling you, we should definitely watch this today, whether it's going to be the day for the big one or we're just going to see some periodic more 3s and 4s out here in various locations like we've been seeing. I have a feeling we will see a little bit more activity throughout the day today, so I'll keep an eye on it. The San Andreas Fault is holding steady for now, but that's not going to be the case, folks. And again, remember, you got to pound this into people's heads, is that these earthquake events here that we're seeing all over the place here is not preventing the big one from happening. And it's not relieving strain. It's a false. That is false. Look it up. Dr. Lucy Jones said it live on TV, and it's always been in my head how these little bitty earthquakes really don't relieve strain out here. There's so much strain and stress built up. There's absolutely no way that a couple of these little bitty ones would push off the strain. If anything, they're adding strain out here. That's an overall pattern sign of strain against the plate boundary. Elevated activity across numerous regions, as we've seen here in Southern California recently, are all indicative of potentially something bigger happening out here, folks. So just be on guard, stay safe. We'll catch you guys out here a little bit later on this evening, unless something major happens. Have a good one.